Last year, I read 17 books in 2024, at least according to Goodreads. I mean, sometimes I forget to log my books, whatever. I also left a few more books half finished, which means I never actually met my reading goal for 2024. My goal was 20 books, and I got 17, so close. So naturally, my goal for this year is 25. Let's see if I can hit an even higher number. But today we're gonna go through all of the books that I read or half read in 2024, and we're gonna rank them all from worst to best. But first, I'm going to give a few honourable mentions to the books that I didn't read the full way through. It wouldn't be fair to include them in the ranking system, but I do want to talk about them and talk about maybe why I put them down. Is it because the book was shit, or is it because I'm shit? I don't know, let's find out. The first one I want to talk about was an audiobook, and I feel like that's immediately half of the problem. That's half of the reason why I put it down, and that's because I just simply find it harder to be completely gripped and hooked by an audiobook because I'm a multitasking queen. I listen to my audiobooks when I'm in the shower, when I'm doing housework, when I'm doing anything at the same time, which means an audiobook has to be really, really interesting, otherwise I'll kind of zone out and I'll zone back in 10 minutes later and be like, who the fuck are all these characters? What are we doing? Gonna come say hi? You're only allowed to say hi. He's giving spoilers on the books, so we're gonna cut all that out. You're allowed to say hi and then you've got to leave.
Hi guys. Yep.
I forget what I was saying. That boy has interrupted my brain flow. Basically, an audiobook has to be really, really gripping, and I just wasn't ultimately gripped by this one. It is The Accidental Medium by Tracy Whitwell. And this book is kind of exactly what it sounds like. A girl, the main lassie in this book, finds out that she is a medium, and she never knew that before. She can, like, communicate with spirits, those beyond the grave, and she actually uses that skill to later on in the book try to solve crimes. It's quite a cool concept, I will admit. I mean, I was initially... Pluto, what are you doing, my babe? Look, my little cat's in the corner. Honestly, sounds like quite a good concept. I was initially won over by the concept. I spent a whole Audible credit on this book. And the bit that I did listen to was funny, it was witty, it's very Geordie. But for some reason, I just lost interest in it a little bit. But like I said, the concept seems quite promising. So if that sounds like it's your thing, then maybe check it out. I think my issue is that I'm just not that much of a ghosty, paranormal, supernatural kind of girl. I mean, people have been asking me for years to integrate like paranormal, ghosty stories onto my main channel, and I'm always like, nah, kind of bores me. I think it's because I genuinely believe in all that kind of stuff. I believe in spirits and I believe that they can communicate through the realms or whatever. I don't know, I kind of believe in it in more of a spiritual sense rather than a sensational, like, ghost story, spooky, ooh, you know? But anyway, yeah, I dropped that audiobook halfway through. The next audiobook that I also dropped halfway through is We Solve Murders by Richard Osman. Legend, love him. This has been such a popular book this year. I've seen so many people reading this, but honestly, I think I'm just a little bit true crime fatigued at the moment. I think that's also a factor in why I put the last book down too. They're both like investigation type things, and I mean, there's a reason I'm having a break from my main channel as well. It's because all of that shit is just getting a bit too much for me at the moment. I'm also learning a lot about what I personally like to read, and I do love thrillers and kind of detective novels in a way, but I prefer them from the point of view of like the fucked up killer, you know, rather than the detective who is trying to solve the case. And that's what this one is. It's a detective novel. I think I'm just learning that I prefer my crime thrillers to be a little bit more fucked up. I definitely think I will finish this book at some point. I do want to give it another go because it wasn't bad. Like I say, I just got a little bit fatigued, so I put it down. And the last honourable mention, speaking of fatigue, actually, in 2024, I was a little bit Taylor Swifted out. I love her. I love her. I love her. I love her. Let me preface this by letting you know how much I love this woman. So this is Taylor, Era by Era, an unauthorized biography by Caroline Sullivan. And I think just because I know how this ends, I know that she is the pop star of the world. I just wasn't. My cat is messing with my camera. Girly pop. The cheek of it as well, because she's purring. She just likes the attention. She'll do shit until you come over and get her, and then she's like, ha ha, hi. But yeah, I know how it ends. So there was nothing like really gripping me to read a lot of this book. It was very, very interesting to read all the details of like her childhood and how she began. I did not know that her dad was that like rich and powerful though, by the way. I mean, I guess it makes sense now how she was able to debut so young. She was what, like 15, 16 years old? I have seen some superfans say that this book doesn't give you any more information than you might already know. So if you're like a super Swiftie, maybe give this one a miss. But if you're a casual fan or a new fan like I am, then this was really interesting. It had a lot of information. There's a lot of stories crammed into this. So yeah, if you're interested, I kind of enjoyed it. Or the bit that I read. So now, honourable mentions out of the way, it is time to rank the 17 books that I completed in 2024 from worst to best. Let's start with the worst book, in my opinion, that I read in 2024. I'm actually kind of scared to say this because I know it's going to be a controversial take. The book that is at the bottom of my list is Everyone in This Room Will Someday Be Dead by Emily Austen. This book is rated so highly across the board. Everyone that reads this thinks that it is amazing, but it just didn't do it for me. I gave it 2 stars. I need to give my usual disclaimer really quick, and that is that I rate things with my heart. All of my ratings are so personal. They are so subjective to how I felt about the book. It's not an objective 2 stars, it's an Ellie 2 stars. In fact, my boyfriend always says there's 4 ways that you can rate things. There's 4 categories that art can fall into. It was good, I liked it. It was good, I didn't like it. It was bad, I didn't like it. And it was bad, but I liked it. I personally don't really use that rating system because I don't care about how objectively good or not it is. I more so use my ratings as like a personal little diary to remember how I felt about that book when I read it. Me and Jack were having this conversation and he was, because he's a proper film guy, he's like, yeah, I've rated films 5 stars before when I didn't like them. And that is so alien to me. I get that it's all about like objective rating and being a critic, but I'm not. I am just girl, and these are just girls' ratings of things. But back to Everyone in This Room Will Someday Be Dead. Cracking title, by the way, because that's actually what drew me to this book in the first place. I bought it on Audible. I went into it completely blind. I had no idea what it was about. So it is essentially about this super anxious lesbian named Gilda who somehow accidentally ends up getting a job at a Catholic church. Immediately, to me, that was a captivating concept. So she turns up to the Catholic church for some sort of event. I think it was like free therapy or whatever. She turns up and the pastor thinks that she's there for a job interview, and she is so anxious, so nervous that she doesn't correct him. She just kind of goes along with it, and she ends up getting the job, which honestly is something I would do. So she's working there at this Catholic church as a big lesbian, and she is kind of trying to hide her sexuality, but not in a sad way, even though that concept is innately sad that you have to kind of hide a part of your identity in order to keep a job. But she's humorous about it. And that aspect I really liked. I found it funny, it was quirky, it was interesting, it was endearing in a lot of ways. But there were bits of this book that I didn't like. I'm gonna try not to give too much away, but for example, she is a lesbian woman that is stringing along a straight guy for the whole entire book. She's going on dates with this guy, and I'm just like, why? And she also starts to impersonate a dead person to the point where the dead person's friend thinks that they're still alive because Gilda is pretending to be them. I don't know, there were a lot of parts of this book where like I was just like, stop it, just stop. I'm not sure that Gilda is meant to be an unlikable main character, but for me she was. I didn't like her. But I'm gonna be so honest, I think above all these other reasons, I think it was just that the concept of this book is not for me. And that's unfortunate because it's not the author's fault, it's not the book's fault. Honestly, it's mine for going in blind, but that's how I like to read. I like to know nothing about the story before I go in. And like I said, I've really learnt what I personally like to read, and a book that is so heavily based on the inevitability of death and fearing death so greatly was not for me. It was not for my mental health either when I picked up this book. Just constant talk of death. I don't know, I'm just too anxious for that. But if that sounds like your thing, then do check it out because it is highly rated elsewhere, just not right here in this video. So now we are venturing into books that I rated 3 stars in 2024. Yeah, I've never given a book a 1-star review before because the author worked really hard, you know. I only gave one book 2 stars and now we're on to 3. My boyfriend always makes fun of me because my ratings sound higher than they are when I like explain my reasoning for whatever, and he's like, you can rate things 1 and 2 stars, you know. I'm like, no, I can't, that's mean. So I'm gonna actually start with an audiobook. I've only held 1 book up for you so far, but I'm gonna start with an audiobook in the 3-star space, and that is The Burnout by Sophie Kinsella. Another audiobook that I listened to when I was actually personally suffering really badly with burnout. And hey, one thing that I cannot knock about this book is how accurate Kinsella writes the feeling of burnout. I related to the main character so much. The hopelessness, the exhaustion, the want to do nothing other than just like sit and mope. And that makes it sound devastating. It's not. It's a very funny book. It's a very light-hearted book, although it does tackle this quite serious, quite sad problem. So basically, it's all about this girl called Sasha who is suffering from burnout, and so her mum sends her to this like wellness retreat hotel type thing, and her mum tells the staff that she is a proper health nut, and so they keep serving her kale smoothies every day, and she hates them, but she can't tell them that she doesn't like it. She feels too awkward, so she's just kind of suffering in this wellness retreat. There's also a man that is staying at this same wellness retreat, and at first our main character Sasha hates this man. They don't get on, they rub each other the wrong way, but throughout the book their relationship transforms. And that's all I'm gonna say. I don't really remember that much about the plot, and it just didn't interest me all that much. I just really liked the portrayal of the burnout, and that was about it. So 3 stars from me. Oh, finally, a book that I can show you the physical copy of. Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow. Again, I think this is another hot take because loads of people rate this so highly. Not me though. Sorry. Actually, this is a very balanced experience for me. It's a 3-star, and to me that is very accurate. It was just very middle of the road for me. There were parts of this book that I really liked, and there were parts of this book that I didn't so much like. You can hear my more in-depth review of Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow in this video that I did when Jack Edwards actually bought me this book. So every time I say that I don't really like it, I feel really bad because he spent his own money on this for me. To quickly summarize, the things that I did like in this book were the whole descriptions and the journey of creating a video game. I was very absorbed in all of that. I loved it. It really fed my creative mind. Like, it was so unique to read about, someone building a whole like game world. I loved it. I also loved how this book addressed a lot of very serious topics: racism, misogyny in the workplace, disability, physical disability. One of the main characters was in a car crash when he was very young, and he is kind of suffering with the physical disability and also kind of the mental toll that that took on him at a very early age. And I think a lot of that is addressed so beautifully. But the things that I didn't like in this book: student and professor relationship. Boo. Ew. This guy stinks. And I also think the book was maybe just a bit too long for me. I feel like that girl on TikTok that was like, guys, there are so many words on the page. That was me reading this. There's too many words on the page. I think when it comes to books that span over a lot of years, maybe even over decades, sometimes they lose me a little bit. Sometimes I just get a bit confused. I'm like, when are we actually gonna like wind off now? They just keep getting older, and they just keep doing stuff, and I'm like, when are we gonna go to bed? My next 3-star read is actually a classique, The Metamorphosis by Franz Kafka. I have always loved the concept of this book. If you are somehow unfamiliar with The Metamorphosis, it basically opens with the main character, Gregor Samsa. He wakes up in his bed and he has turned into a bug, a giant cockroach. There is no explanation ever given as to why he is a bug, at least I don't think, not one that I caught anyway. He just is, and we just deal with it. So for a while at the start of the book, he is locked in his bedroom, he's stressing out, and then he eventually reveals his new form to his family, and they're all a bit horrified at first, but then they start to look after him, they start to, well, kind of hide him from the rest of the world, because what the fuck do you do? Why is our brother turned into a cockroach? It sounds silly, and of course the concept is very absurdist, but holy shit, does this hit deep. So the family start to struggle financially because Gregor Samsa, Mr. Bug, was kind of like one of the only working members of the family, so money's running out. And over time, Gregor starts to feel the isolation and the disconnect from himself and from the rest of society and from his family as well. Even though he's living in the same house with the same people, everything changes. His family start to see him as a burden, and they eventually start to neglect his care, and they hide him from the rest of the world until the miserable end. People have interpreted this book very differently over the years. Some people say that it has to do with Franz Kafka's own very problematic relationship with his own father. Some people say that it's to do with how Franz Kafka saw himself and his appearance, because, well, famously, Franz Kafka thought that he was a fugly little rat, didn't he? If only he could see the TikTok girlie swooning over him in the 2020s. I will definitely say that this book is high up on the 3-star scale for me. I would put it at like a 3.8. I just couldn't give it a 4 stars, unfortunately, because it just lacks a certain je ne sais quoi, or whatever. Je ne sais quoi? It all just kind of takes place in the same apartment. Obviously, he never leaves because he's a cockroach that is being hidden from the world. So there's just not that much going on other than like bug updates. So that is why it can't push past a 4 for me. So a bit of a whiplash moment now as we go into our next book. We're going from Franz Kafka to smutty romance. Twisted Love by Anna Huang. Book Talk fave, but not a fave of mine personally. I actually listened to this for free on Audible. For some reason, they had it for free and you could just add it to your library, and I had run out of credits and I said, yep, I'll take that one. I realized very quickly into my reading journey that I am not a smut girly. I'm really not. And I say that even though there are a few different smutty books to come. Ugh, pun not intended. But one thing that I will give this book is Alex Volkov, the love interest of this book. Woo, girl. This is one of the only romantic interests in a book that has actually kind of gotten me as well. Like, why do I get a little butterfly in my tummy about Alex Volkov? Not too much, but damn. He's like very stone cold stoic. He's very dark and mysterious. He's brooding. And he is tasked with looking after his best friend's little sister while his best friend goes away somewhere. His best friend's little sister has like this psycho ex-boyfriend, and like basically Alex Volkov just gets so protective of Ava, which is the girl in the story. And that's what does it for me, you know. I like the protective ones. Other than that, I don't actually really have much to say about this book at all. I can't really remember the plot. All I do remember is that Alex Volkov had a very traumatic life. Other than that, I think they just had sex. I probably won't pick up the rest of the books in this series. I know that it's like a big series that is very loved by the Book Talk girlies. And, you know, do your thing, girls, but it's not my thing, really. Even though I spoke about the Metamorphosis before Twisted Love, I would rate the Metamorphosis higher. I didn't rate the books within the star bracket. Like, all the 3-star books are just kind of like thrown in there. I should have probably ordered them. The Metamorphosis is my highest 3-star. So now on to 4-star reads. I'm gonna start with The Waiting Years by Fumiko Enchi. This is a Japanese literary fiction book from the 50s. I read this while I was on holiday with my boyfriend. I actually think it was Jack that picked out this book for me in our favourite bookshop in Bristol. It follows an older married woman whose husband has given her the task of going out into the city to find him a concubine, a mistress. His wife is tasked with going out and finding a younger woman to bring back into their household to live with them so that her husband has a young woman to regularly sleep with. Just that entire concept had me from the start, because what the fuck? That is probably the worst situation I could imagine being put in as a wife. This book is set towards the end of the 1800s, when this kind of situation was a very common thing, actually, among the rich and ruling classes of Asia. Poor families would essentially sell their daughters to be concubines for these rich men. They would go off and live with them, and they would hardly see their daughter ever again. And this book is just fascinating for so many different reasons. Of course, the wife is in utter turmoil, but her willingness to go along with it anyway, and how emotionless she has to be about the whole thing, because, well, does she really have much choice? And once she has gone out and chosen a mistress to take back home to her husband, we then follow that character as she grows from this very timid, meek teenage girl who is nervous and is brand new to this family. We follow her as she grows older, as she becomes more than just this sex object. She becomes her own woman with her own thoughts and emotions about this whole situation. I'm not gonna lie to you all, it's not exactly like a gripping page turner that's gonna have you on the end of your seat, but it is very interesting and very emotional nonetheless. I really recommend this if that sounds like your kind of thing, and if you're interested in like Asian history. I probably should have saved this for when we go to Japan. Me and my boyfriend are going to Japan later this year, and I want to take a bunch of Japanese literature with me. I like doing that. I like matching my literature to my vacations. Like sometimes when I go on a little Greek holiday, I'll take a bit of mythology. I can't really relate anything else. I don't know, maybe next time I go to America, I'll take the Kendall and Kylie book. Who knows? I'm actually really excited to read the Kendall and Kylie book. It's called Rebels, City of Indra. Sounds like a load of shit, and I'm very excited. Fine, should we talk about ACOTAR? I read ACOTAR. In fact, I listened to both A Court of Thorns and Roses and A Court of Mist and Fury, the first and second book, as audiobooks this year, as dramatized audiobooks, let me tell you. Audible has these like movies for your ears. It's great. It has like a full cast, it has music, it has sound effects. Like these are some of the best audiobooks I think I've ever listened to. But yeah, I did only get 2 books into this series, and that is where it's gonna stay for a while. The plot of the second book slayed big time, actually, I have to say. I rated them both 4 stars, but ACOTAR would be lower on that and ACOMAF would be higher on that. Just the way that the plot has twisted and turned and done a full 180 in the second book, like, I really didn't see it coming, and that's why I rate it so highly. If somehow you don't know about A Court of Thorns and Roses or the whole series, let me give you a quick little rundown. It is a romantasy series. Immediately, I had never really read fantasy before, and I mean, we've established that I'm not much of a romance reader either, so the fact that both of these books scored quite high says a lot in itself. Basically, the main character, Feyre, does something naughty, and then she gets whisked away as a punishment. She gets taken away from her family and taken to go and live in this like magical realm. I don't know. It's like the same world, but it's with a load of magical beings. I'm not sure how to fucking describe it. So she's whisked away to this other place, and of course she ends up falling in love with this like half man half beast thing. Is he like half wolf, Tamlin? I don't know, but he's usually a man. He only turns into a wolf on special occasions, so it's not weird. Yep. I don't know, there's drama between all these different like magical courts, and then there's this evil bitch queen called Ianthe that is like so desperate to kill Feyre. She really wants to kill Feyre, and she nearly does. So there's like all this magical drama, and then like every 2 seconds Feyre's like 1 second gotta shag this wolf. In fact, I don't think they have sex when he's in animal mode. Surely I would have recoiled if I'd heard that. I think they only do that shit when he's human mode. But that is essentially my take on the ACOTAR series so far. Maybe I'm not selling it that well, but I guess if ACOTAR is your thing, then you definitely have already heard of it. This is not your first impression of the very famous romantasy series that everyone has been obsessed with in 2024. Great, that was actually 2 birds and 1 scone, wasn't it? So now let's do a little bit of non-fiction, shall we? I actually read this one as part of a non-fiction online book club. This is The Psychopath Test by Jon Ronson. It's all about the psychology and the treatment of madness, of psychopathy. It's a very interesting concept, and let me tell you, Ronson delivers. He interviews so many different people in this book, from doctors and people that diagnose this kind of thing, to actual psychopaths themselves, to big CEOs, like the richest of the rich people that are definitely psychopaths. Me and Jack talk about this quite a bit, like, in order to be a billionaire, in order to make that much money and to make decisions that shaft other people in order to get you billions, then there must be a fucking screw loose up there. Like, they're lacking empathy for sure. And yeah, Ronson covers every different element of psychopathy. But my favorite part of this book, there's a whole chapter on it where Ronson speaks with this guy that has been put in Broadmoor Psychiatric Hospital. So basically, he committed a crime, he was due to be sent to jail, and he was like, fuck that, don't want to go to jail. So he watched a bunch of Ted Bundy documentaries and took notes and learnt how to act like a psychopath so that he could get put in a psychiatric hospital rather than a prison. And it worked. They believed him. He faked being a psychopath, got put in Broadmoor, and then once he was in there, he realised, wait, this is even worse than prison could have ever been. I mean, once you're in a psychiatric hospital, you put on medication and then you never know when you're going to be able to leave because, well, that's kind of the whole point of a psychiatric hospital, is you stay until they deem you to be different to how you came in. And if he lied about his state when he came in, like, he gets kind of stuck there, honestly. He gets into Broadmoor, doesn't like it, and then tries to tell the doctors, like, wait, I faked being a psychopath to get in here. Like, I lied. Can you tell that I'm actually sane and that I can be put in a prison? I'm fine. And they just kind of look at this guy and they're like, all right, mate, sounds like what a psychopath would say. And he's like, no, I'm not a psychopath. And it's really interesting. Jon Ronson speaks with this guy quite a bit, and Ronson himself is trying to work out this guy. Is this guy even lying to Ronson? Is he actually genuinely a psychopath that should be in Broadmoor, but now he's lying and manipulating his way out? Because that also sounds like something a psychopath would do. He's gotten himself into a right old predicament, hasn't he? And that was my favourite part of this book. But there are so many different stories, so much on psychopathy. If you're a true crime girly, a psychology girly, this is a book for you. Next, I want to talk about another audiobook that I listened to, Good Material by Dolly Alderton. I know a lot of people didn't rate this one all that highly, and I agree with people's criticisms. A lot of people say that you can very much tell that this is a woman writing from the point of view of a man, and like she just doesn't really get what a man is actually like. I didn't mind that though, because I am woman. And I would prefer if men were written by a woman. It's basically about this fella called Andy who is going through a breakup. He got broken up with by his girlfriend and he is devastated. And he's just trying to figure out, like, why. He wants to be back with her. He's trying to find a way back to her. And he's also, as all of this is going on, he's also a stand-up comedian. Ha 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 ha. It's a very funny book. It's about this guy who, is trying to make it work as a stand-up comedian. It's not really working for him. He's also dealing with a breakup. A lot of people say that this male character, Andy, is quite insufferable. I didn't think it was that bad, honestly. But the real redeeming factor of this book is that the last section of it, I would say like the last 15%, is actually from the girl's point of view, from his ex-girlfriend's point of view. And this sheds a whole new light on what Andy has been telling us for the whole book. This whole time you really sympathize with this fella because you're just hearing about his heartbreak from his point of view. But then she comes in and challenges your perspective. She kind of gives reasons as to why she split up with him and why she can't be with him. For me, that last section was fabulous, brilliant, beautiful, and something that a lot of men just simply would not understand. I mean, without giving too much away, I don't want to like tell you her reasons for the breakup when that's the end of the book, but I will summarize that feeling with a very famous quote by our beloved Cher. Men aren't necessities, they're luxuries, like a dessert. We love them, but we don't need them to live. Should we do a thriller now? The Couple at Number 9 by Claire Douglas. Again, I listened to this on Audible and I bloody loved it. It's about a couple who move into a house at number 9. The house was actually already in their family. It was her grandmother's home, and so she like gives it to her granddaughter and her fiance. They move in, she's pregnant with a baby, they're renovating the house, and what do they find when they dig up the garden? Only 2 bloody dead bodies. So this whole police investigation begins, and they find that the house was definitely in her grandma's possession at the time that those bodies were buried there. So does that make Grandma a killer? Well, I guess you'll have to read and find out for yourself, because I'm not going to give it all away. By the time these bodies are found in the garden, Grandma is actually hospitalized with quite severe Alzheimer's. So the police are trying to talk to her and interview her, but her answers are just not really making any sense. But bit by bit, the truth is revealed and the ending is mental. Oh, I loved it, I loved it, I loved it. Anyway, next book. In fact, I'm gonna do another pair of books now because they are the exact same book, just in different fonts. We have The Pumpkin Spice Cafe and The Christmas Tree Farm. These are both by Laurie Gilmore. I haven't read the bakery one yet, the Cinnamon Bun Bakery, is it called? I don't know where it is actually, maybe it's up north. But these books are all set in the same town. It's called Dream Harbor, and it is this very idyllic, cozy, tight-knit town full of very unique individuals. You get pretty much all the same characters in each of the different books, so it's like returning to a group of old friends. It's lovely. This series of books is like ultimate comfort food for your eyes. It's a bit of fluffy romance, both of them. I mean, both of these different stories about a very independent woman who moves to Dream Harbor and wants to start up her own business. In the Pumpkin Spice Cafe, she's starting a cafe. In the Christmas Tree Farm, she's starting a farm. And each of these stories is about how these women become even more independent, even more confident in themselves and their abilities as they build a life for themselves in this new town. And of course, there's a romantic interest for both of them. They both get a lumberjack each. But the romance is so, like, there's so much yearning. It's always like, no, I don't have time for a man right now. I couldn't think of anything worse than a relationship. No, stay away from me, for like 80% of the book. And it's like, girl, just let him go down on you. Like, just let him. Sorry. But that's what it feels like. Towards the end of these books, you're like, girl, just let him hit. It does take forever for them to just admit that they're gonna be together. But I don't know, I liked it. You know, like deep down that they are gonna be together by the end of the book. Because these are cozy books. Of course, no one's gonna like fucking die at the end. But when these women finally get their man, in each of these stories, it turns into Smut Town, USA. It was crazy. There are so many sex scenes in these books towards the end, you know, once they actually finally get together. But what I really, really loved about these books is Gilmore's ability to create a very cozy, festive, seasonal atmosphere and constantly keep you in it throughout the book. In pretty much every scene, she is reminding you what you can see, what you can smell, what you can hear, and it's always so festive. Like in the Pumpkin Spice Cafe, she's always reminding you that there's these like little mini pumpkins on the cafe front desk, and there's the smell of like hot chocolate and apple cider donuts or whatever. I mean, it's not like groundbreaking stuff by any means. It is literally just setting a scene, but that meant that these books were like ultimate seasonal reads for me. Like, I really felt autumnal this year because I was reading this. I really felt Christmassy this year because I was reading this. It's just really immersing yourself in that season. I'm really hoping that she brings out like a spring book this year, because I'd love to have like the summer version of these. Oh, I did love them. Anyways, our last 4-star read. Oh wait, there's one that I actually completely forgot to rate, and that is What We Talk About When We Talk About Love. This is a collection of short stories by Raymond Carver. You know what? I would give this like a high 3, low 4 anyway, so we're just a bit out of sync with the rest. Very interesting, very quirky. Like, these short stories are really just a snippet of a situation in time, and sometimes you're a bit like, what's going on? Like, I find myself finishing some of these stories and being like, okay, so? Some of them are very memorable though. Like the very first story in this book, it's about like a little yard sale that's happening outside this fella's house. He's moved all of his furniture outside, and he never actually, if I'm remembering correctly, he never says that it's a yard sale. Like, you're led to believe that he just like puts all his stuff in the garden for like whatever reason. You never really find out. But a young couple come and like essentially buy all of it, I think, and they like dance with him outside in all the furniture, and then the story ends. And it's like, what did I just read? I don't know, it's interesting. I did lend this book to my auntie on holiday, and she was like, what the fuck is this that you've given me? So it's not for everyone. And you can see on that top corner that my cat has nibbled away. So at least Pluto likes this, hey. But anyway, let's do my last 4-star book before we get into the best of the best, in my opinion. We have a book from She Who Shall Not Be Named, not J.K. Rowling. Colleen Hoover. Yep, Verity by Colleen Hoover. I got told off by quite a few of you when I posted a picture of this book on Instagram, people being like, no girl, Colleen Hoover's controversial. I know, but this book was already on my bookshelf since like 2 years ago. People recommended this book to me when Colleen Hoover was absolutely blowing up, and so I bought it and I completely forgot about it, and then she gets into all this controversy, and then I was like, oh fuck, I've got that book that I actually was quite excited to read. So I just did it. I just went and did it, and God, it were good. It was good. It's like Hoover's only thriller, and it's really, really good. Like, I need her to stop with all this abuse romance shit and write some more of this. So it's about this like world famous author called Verity who has fallen into a coma or something similar, and her husband, along with her publishers, are looking to try to complete this book series that she had started, and then I think she was like a couple of books off finishing it, and now she can't finish it, but like the world is expecting it. So despite her, you know, being in a coma, they're trying to figure out a way to get these books out, and so they want to bring in like a ghost writer who really understands Verity's style, and they find this girl called Lowen. She's our main character. She's like a young and up-and-coming writer in the same sphere as Verity. She gets brought in to write the rest of this book series. She actually goes to stay with Verity's husband in her home, and Verity is there. She's like in a hospital bed upstairs, I want to say. But she goes to stay in the house with the husband and the kids and whatever, because that's where Verity's home office is. And she's like rummaging around trying to find notes or plans for these books that Verity had. And she ends up stumbling across something terrible. As Lowen is staying in this house, things start to get very weird very quickly. Something is going on in that house, and you don't know what is happening for a while, but I kind of love that about a thriller. I love when I know that something's off, but you're not giving me too much of what it is yet. I'm like, oh, what is it? Is it a ghost? Is it a killer? What is it? Honestly, I'm not going to say another word about this book because I genuinely really, really enjoyed it. If you can get your hands on a copy of this, do read it if you're like a crimey thriller girl. Honestly, the ending, the very ending of this book is wild. It's wild, it's wild, it's wild. I think about it actually quite a lot. I think about it all the time. Then I might run out of time. But I finally found my baby. And baby might be mine. But yeah, I don't know who to believe. I don't know what to believe. I don't know. I don't know. I just know that I love Verity. And now it's time for the 5-star bangers. Let's begin. Should we kick it off with a memoir, with an audiobook that I listened to? Julia Fox's Down the Drain. Holy majoli, this woman has lived 100 different lives that are all so insane in different ways. In fact, many of them are actually very tragic. Julia had possibly one of the toughest starts in life that I think I've ever heard. Her teenage years more so were filled with drugs and bouts of homelessness and a job that she found on Craigslist to be a dominatrix. When she was still in high school, she was a sex worker. Throughout this book, she talks so openly about her BPD, about her suicide attempt, her heroin overdose that nearly killed her. And then we get to her starlet era, the Julia Fox that we all know now. She talks about Uncut Gems and Kanye West and how she became a fashion icon. She's everywhere. She's so Julia. 5 stars, 5 million stars. Thank you, Julia, for this masterpiece. I love you so much. And apparently it's being made into a TV series, so that'll be really interesting. I'm excited to see where that goes. And maybe Julia's gonna play herself. Ooh, I need Julia to play herself. Oh, I love her. She's such an icon. Next up, we have Boy Parts by Eliza Clark. Holy, I loved her. If you did watch my video where I reviewed all the books that Jack Edwards bought me, I love this so much with every fiber of my being. It's fucked up and it's disgusting and it's amazing. This is such a common favorite for the freaky weird girls, and I love bonding with other freaks about this book. So if you don't know, the main character is a fetish photographer who slowly starts to lose her mind and begins abusing and attacking the men that she photographs. It's very much like a female version of American Psycho. She is very narcissistic. She's obsessed with how she looks. And I just thoroughly loved every single page of this book. The main character is such a bitch and I hate her and I love her. I will recommend this book to the freaky weird girls until the day that I die. The only thing is, make sure you check in the trigger warnings if you're sensitive or easily affected by different things. There's a lot to warn you about in this book. Sexual assault, eating disorders, all of the above. I did go a bit more in depth with my review of that book in the Jack Edwards video, and the same goes for this next book. Almond. This is by Son Won-pyung, and this is a devastating yet very wholesome story about a young boy with a brain condition called alexithymia, which basically means that he really struggles to process and understand and even express emotion, both in himself and in others. And this gets him into some very sticky, tricky situations where people think that he is just weird because he doesn't react how they imagine someone should react in a situation. People think that he's being sarcastic or weird or cold or mean, and his own mother is very, very worried about how he's gonna get on in the world. But one day, due to a horrific tragedy, his mother, his whole entire family actually, is wiped out. And now our main character, this child, must navigate life and his condition all alone. This book is just such a roller coaster. It deals with death and grief and financial troubles, an unlikely friendship with another boy. There's themes of found family in here. That's where it gets really wholesome. I love that part of this book. It's just such a great read. I am so grateful for Jack recommending this to me because it genuinely is one of my favorite books of this whole year. Now let's do a non-fiction moment real quick. I want to talk about a book that has really, really changed my life. I think I'm gonna get a bit deep when it comes to this one, but I was thinking, like, how could I possibly not get deep when talking about a book that has transformed me so much? And that is The Body Keeps the Score by Bessel van der Kolk. He is an expert in the field of trauma, and that's what this whole book is about. It's about the effect that trauma has on the human mind and body. And this book is genuinely the most enlightening thing I think I've ever come across in my whole entire life. It's not really like a how to heal your trauma book. It's more so just an understanding of how trauma can actually change the brain and the thought processes and the ways in which a victim of trauma might struggle with simple things like self-control, like trust, like even just experiencing basic pleasure. This book is perhaps more so aimed at professionals and people that are working with victims of trauma, you know, like therapists, counselors. In fact, I can tell that my own therapist has read this exact book because a lot of what I was reading aligns with the things that he has been teaching me for the past few months. Yeah, I'm gonna get really vulnerable with you guys for a second. I am a queen with a lot of trauma. I went through a lot of shit in my childhood and in my adolescence, and parts of this book felt absolutely gutting to me. It was like someone was holding a mirror in front of me and explaining the darkest parts of myself back to me. But for whatever reason, it wasn't an uncomfortable experience. In fact, like I said, it was an enlightening experience. It was actually comforting just to hear someone acknowledge and understand, completely judgment-free, what I'm going through, especially about the nastier elements of trauma and the aftermath of trauma, things that I am struggling with having a lot of shame around. Trauma can be a very tricky thing to treat, and even for the victim to realize that they need to treat. There is a lot of shame that surrounds trauma and the ways that it shows up in your life. Me specifically, the ways that I have self-sabotaged have always been a point of sheer embarrassment for me. But thanks to this book, I can understand it all a lot more now, and I'm starting to break those cycles, especially with the help of my boyfriend, my husband, my soulmate. He has been incredible for me. This book has been incredible for me. My therapist has been incredible for me. Sorry, having a little mushy moment, but if you are struggling with the aftermath of trauma, this book is definitely one to pick up. And when I say trauma, by the way, it doesn't necessarily have to be like some massive horrific event that happened to you. Trauma can be little and often. Maybe you were verbally abused every day for a period of time. Maybe you were cyberbullied. Maybe you were just chronically left out of the friend group. Yeah, sure, you were physically safe and well, but your brain may have changed a lot as a result of that perceived danger, the perceived threat. Even things that you wouldn't typically think are traumatic could be a cause of trauma. It's definitely something to look into with a professional. Don't let me and this book diagnose you with trauma. But I think a lot of people hear the word trauma and they think that it can only be a horrific event like your mum is murdered or you were abused as a child or something, which are horrific, traumatic things to happen to a person, but so is cyberbullying, and so is being chronically left out of the rest of your peer groups. I'm just using those as examples, but there are so many different ways in which a human can be traumatized and you might not even realize. In fact, one of the reasons I love this book so much is because it helped me to stop looking for answers, for a diagnosis. For years, I have been trying to pinpoint and label what is quote-unquote wrong with me, only to find out through my current therapist and through this book that there is nothing inherently wrong with my brain. I don't have an illness of the brain, I've just been through some shit. And now my brain reacts in ways that are not exactly favourable. For a long time, I thought that I was clearly displaying symptoms of BPD or autism or ADHD. I was reading a lot of overlap with what I was experiencing and the symptoms of these disorders, these conditions. But after checking every possible route, it seems that actually these symptoms that I was experiencing were nothing more than symptoms of trauma. And my brain has changed as a result, and I react in different ways. It was honestly quite revolutionary to me to learn that I could help my brain out of this mess that it had been beaten into. And while I'm not sure that 100% healing is possible for me, but for sure I have been getting there slowly. I've been getting better and learning how to navigate the world with the brain that I have. Sorry, that did get very deep. I know I said I was going deep, but then I was like, guys, I want to kill myself. Sorry, no, I don't. I actually really don't. I'm doing well. But like I say, I guess I had to get deep in order to really show you guys how much this book has changed my life. But anyway, if we're done crying and moaning, then we can end this video on my absolute favorite book of the year, None of This Is True by Lisa Jewell. Oh, what a gem. What a beauty. What a thriller. This is the psychological thriller to end all psychological thrillers. It was such a popular book in 2024 for great reason. In fact, it's really inspired me to want to write my own psychological thriller. I actually think I'm gonna do that this year. Once we're back up and running with the main channel, that's my priority. But then after that, I'm writing book. My gosh, the way that Lisa Jewell feeds you little crumbs and hints and doubts throughout, it feels like reading a movie. The way that these secrets are revealed, the way that you flip-flop between trust and suspicion. I think it's a brilliant study as well of a very traumatized character who loses their shit. You feel so much sympathy for this person, but they become so irredeemable. And it's the sociopathy of this character. They are such a sociopath. And I'm not even going to tell you which character it is because, well, I don't want to give it away. I don't want to ruin the brilliance of this story for you. If you're into psychological thrillers, especially with like a social media-y twist, you will love this because it's all about a podcaster who has a podcast guest, and over the course of this story, she is pulling out some intriguing yet horrifying stories out of this woman, and you're taken on such a roller coaster throughout this book. Those are some of my favorite books. Take me on a roller coaster, baby. Make me feel and think all the different things that there are to think and feel. Make me hate this person, make me love them in the next chapter. Like, roller my coaster. I even bought my mum a copy of this book for Christmas, and she is very picky with her thrillers, with her books in general. She will only read books by this one author called Tess Gerritsen. She's obsessed. And this Christmas I was like, girl, please break this pattern just for this book. I promise it's worth it. And now I'm kind of begging you guys to do the same. You should go and read that book if you haven't already. If you somehow missed None of This Is True in 2024, pick it up in 2025. You will not regret it. And that concludes my very subjective roundup of my 2024 reading. I hope you enjoyed my reviews, and if you didn't, then oopsie, goodbye.